we should probably begin. We have a fabulous panel in front of us with some really engaging educational leaders talking to us today about collaboration in higher education and really the future of post-secondary education in Canada. It has been disrupted remarkably in the time of COVID, and people have really been given this opportunity, this moment of reflection. What are we doing well and what can we do better, both at our institutions, but also in the landscape of higher education in Canada more generally. So it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to this President's Panel today, hosted by the Maple League of Universities, Acadia, Bishops, Mount Allison, and St. Francis Xavier. This panel features the 4 university presidents, Peter Ricketts from Acadia, Michael Goldbloom at Bishops, Jean-Paul Boudreau at Mount Allison, and Andrew Haken at St. Francis Xavier. My name is Jessica Riddell, and I have had the privilege of being the executive director of the consortium since July 1st, 2018. And it has been an incredible learning experience to navigate 4 institutional cultures, try to build hubs of collaboration amongst those 4 universities that all share a very similar mission, vision, and values, which is to deliver an extraordinary undergraduate experience to our students. So today we're going to ensure that we place ourselves and situate ourselves on our campuses to think locally but also globally. And one of those key pieces is for us to understand that our institutions are on messy journeys, that we have work to do, that we can do and be better, and to acknowledge the land on which we are situated across our 4 institutions. We at Bishops are in the with the Abenaki people, members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, Mi'kmaq, Wolastoq, Maliseet at Acadia, Mount Allison, and St. Francis Xavier, and we acknowledge and recognize that they are the traditional stewards and protectors of these territories. And in our institutions, we have work to do ahead of us as we value Indigenous ways of knowing and honor the work ahead for truth, reconciliation, and justice for our and with Indigenous peoples. We also have Francophone heritage across our 4 institutions. We're located in regions with rich Francophone heritage, Acadian and Quebecois, and we value the cultural and linguistic context of the areas in which we live and study. And this is a remarkable feature of our 4 institutions where students of our Maple League universities have the opportunity to pursue their education in predominantly English-speaking environments while learning about and immersing themselves in Francophone culture, language, and traditions. So my name is Jessica Riddell, and as I mentioned, I've been the executive director since July 1st, 2018. I'm also a full professor in the Department of English at Bishops University, and I hold an endowed chairship in undergraduate teaching excellence, the Stephen Jaroslawski Chair of Undergraduate Excellence. And it really allows me to have a broad mandate around what teaching excellence looks like, both at Bishops, across the Maple League, and then around Canada and across the world. And it really is something that fits our mission, vision, and values of our institutions, which is how do we deliver a rigorous, delightful 21st century liberal education. So Peter Ricketts is the president of Acadia University. He's also the chair of our President's Council, our Maple League President's Council, which meets regularly. We have Michael Goldbloom at Bishops University, who is our sort of most senior president. He's been around since the Maple League was the U4 and has really been a key thinker and advocate for this consortium since its inception. Jean-Paul Boudreau joined Mount Allison 2 years ago and has been an innovative change maker on his campus and beyond. And last but not least, welcoming Andrew Haken, who is only 15 days into his mandate as president of St. Francis Xavier, but is already, hitting the ground running in really productive and community building ways. So it's just my honor to introduce these 4 presidents who will form the panel today. I'd like to do a very quick snapshot, a kind of highlight reel of the things that we've been doing with the Maple League over the past year, and really encourage you to go and look at that report. It's online. We post quarterly reports and we post our year-end reports, and it has been online since July 1st, and I really encourage you to go look at that at our Maple League website. But very, very quickly, in terms of our highlight reel for internal engagement, we have some really exciting things under development. We launched our virtual Maple League TLC on June the 1st, which is committed to supporting faculty prepare for fall 2020 and beyond. We have a number of events and programs to support people. We also at the Maple League, you can see from this collage of animation, we host a number of events. We have our annual Up for Debate weekend where we invite members of our 4 institutions to engage in a debate tournament, a TEDx Bishops U event, as well as case competitions for our business departments. We host retention and resilience summits. We just hosted a quality undergraduate summit and invited one of the world's leading experts in undergraduate education, Peter Felton. So we have lots of animating activities and opportunities for students, staff, faculty, and administrative leaders across our 4 institutions. We also do a lot of external engagement, and so we facilitate conversations around quality undergraduate education into larger communities to include them in thinking carefully and critically about what we can do and how we can be better. So we host conversations with university presidents at Universities Canada. We sit on panels with the Globe and Mail. We engage in lots of social innovation and social purpose-driven projects that engage with external partners. And finally, our team. This is a consortium made up of and animated by diverse perspectives with a particular focus on student voices. And so you can see from this sort of picture of the people who are thinking and working and designing and implementing these projects that we have students. We have Maple League Fellows, we have community engagement interns, we have Indigenous Maple League student advisors, we have a Jarislowsky visiting scholar, we have a postgraduate fellow in communications and advancement, we have a director of our virtual Maple League TLC, and we all sit together and meet regularly to build something together and to be adaptive and responsive to our community's needs. So I encourage you, if this is the first time that you've heard about the Maple League, to go look at what we're up to. If this is something that you've been engaged with for a long time, please share this with your friends. Please reach out to us if you want to engage, if you want to sit on a committee or a working group or have a great idea for an interinstitutional collaboration. So without further ado, and we're going to ask a series of questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions to the presidents and they're going to respond. But I also had a series of questions that were submitted in advance of the panel. And so I've curated them and I will ask presidents, but it will be a more sort of loose discussion after this round. So we're going to put the presidents on the hot seat. And we're going to ask some questions. We're going to try to keep it tight and timely. And we're going to put Peter Ricketts, who's the president of the Maple League Council, on the hot spot with the first question. So Peter,
yes,
we have had, since the middle of March, lots of people call it unprecedented or uncharted waters. We have had the fact of a COVID-19 global pandemic stop what we have been doing and force us to rethink, to respond to this disruption. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those significant challenges that universities are facing in the time of COVID?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jessica, and hello, everybody. I just want to welcome everybody to this session. I see we got about 134 people online, so that's tremendous, and thank you all for taking the time to share this period with us and have an important discussion. So appreciate that very much. You're absolutely right. There's no rule book for this. There was no rule book. We're actually writing the rule book now as we work our way through this. So I hope someone's taking notes because if we may have to do this again in the future. So we're definitely learning a lot as we go along. And of course, there's a huge number of significant challenges that you could you could list in response to this question. But just in the interest of time, and given that I have 2 minutes, I'll identify three that I think are probably top of mind, but by no means exclusively so. So the first one is the challenge of keeping our students and our employees healthy and safe, and by extension, our local communities as well. And I think this has been the top priority from day one. When we first heard about COVID-19 and imposed initial travel restrictions, initially to China, back in January, and right through to when we shut our campuses down in March. And now, as we've gone through this whole process of deciding, what to do for the fall, and as we now plan to reopen and employees and students back. So this priority has driven, and I think continues to drive everything we do. The second significant challenge, I would say, is, and particularly certainly from the President's point of view, is keeping our institutions financially and operationally viable, both in the short term and the medium and long term. Quite frankly, this pandemic has hit everybody for six, and we've all suffered financially, and we will do so as enrollment reductions, which are almost certain to occur, are realized in the fall. We've also had a lot of additional costs to incur. So we're constantly making critical decisions to both cut costs and live within our means, and yet at the same time, we have to keep our universities in top gear as we prepare for the fall term. And so ultimately, we've got to ensure that this emergency situation does not do serious and irreparable harm to our institutions and our ultimate survival. And then the third challenge, I would say, is continuing to deliver a high quality student educational experience, whether it be in person or online, while keeping everybody safe by incorporating new norms of social behavior and conduct into our teaching, learning, and living practices. So I think learning to live safely and sustainably with this virus and other viruses that may come after it is probably our greatest challenge that we're facing right now.
Thanks,
I think I've gone over 2 minutes, but
no, you were perfect. You were good. You're right on schedule, and that is a really lovely segue to a question that I have for Michael, which is, can you talk us through the rationale about fall 2020? The Maple Leaf universities are welcoming students in some capacity back to campus. And I was wondering if you could take us through the plans, building off Peter's discussion about health and safety, about what the plans are for fall 2020.
Right. I mean, obviously, the question of what to do in the fall has preoccupied the four presidents, the four institutions, and we have chosen a path which is different than many other, certainly larger institutions, which have decided to go exclusively remotely. We know the virus is still with us. It will be with us in the fall, and therefore there will be risks for students and faculty and staff on our campuses, but we think we can manage those risks. And we also recognize that there are risks for young people to be staying at home and an extended period of physical and social isolation. We don't think that's a good thing for young people. So we've looked hard at this, and I think we've all concluded that we can accommodate, we can welcome students onto our campus, as long as, one, we respect whatever the public health guidelines are. And that has to be, and we're not the experts on that. We will bring our own best judgment, but we're going to be guided by what our public health authorities indicate to us. And I have to say, Jessica, it's what most of our students and their families have told us that they want, right? That the young people who chose to come to our four institutions wanted this a relationship-rich education, which is very difficult to have at distance. So there are a number of factors, I think, that led us to conclude that this was a reasonable and responsible thing to do. The first is there's very limited propagation of the virus in any of our regions. Even here at Bishop's, I know the impression would be that the numbers have obviously been higher in Quebec, but in our region of Quebec, there's been very little propagation of the virus, and that's certainly true in the Maritimes. Most of our students live on campus or within walking distance, so we don't unlike urban universities, we don't have many students getting on crowded public transportation to come to our campuses. Our students, in vast majority, walk to our campuses, and those who don't tend to come in their own cars. So we don't have that image that one has of people crowded into buses or subways in big cities. That's not something that we're subjecting our students or most of our faculty and staff to. The other reality is we're not dense campuses, right? We got a number of buildings spread out over a large area. So again, the density that other places are confronting, we don't have. I don't know if any of us has a tower. I think on the Bishop's campus, there's no building that's more than 3 or 4 stories high. I think that's true for all the Maple League. So one doesn't see, again, you don't think of students crowding into elevators to get to classes. So those are, and I guess the final point is, because we are small and because we have focused on intimate teaching environments, it's actually possible to take a class and move it to a larger space while still respecting the physical distancing. Your class is 300 or 400 students, and there's really no place on any campus that could accommodate at that except maybe a football stadium. So we are able to do that. And now I want to say, just to finish, we are going to require everyone to be fully engaged in making sure that we respect and support each other in terms of health. So we're going to have strict rules at all 4 of our schools around, how many people can gather, how many, physical distancing, mask wearing, and it's going to be critical that this be a community effort. This can't be something that's just imposed as rules. It has to be something that our communities embrace, and I think we're all confident that they will. So we're all developing action plans. If something happens, if there is an outbreak, we're ready to respond to it. But I think that we've made an informed decision, and as long as everybody cooperates, I'm confident that we're going to be able to take this different path and provide the direct experience for our students that they wish. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael. And I think you very clearly articulated how our 4 institutions share a number of differentiating features that are quite remarkably different from perhaps urban campuses or larger universities. And so, I think maybe bouncing off that about the ways in which we share things in common, I wonder, Jean-Paul, if you could talk to us about the value of the Maple League as a kind of hub of collaboration in the time of COVID, and what kinds of things that you've seen either develop or accelerate because of the pressure of this global pandemic.
Sure. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Peter, Andrew, and Michael. This is a great collaboration. A great shout out here to all my colleagues at Mount Allison. I was seeing the number of names coming across the screen as you were logging in. I know a number of vice presidents, faculty, and staff and students. So great to see our community come together here. And thank you, Jessica, for bringing us together. Thank you for your leadership as the ED of the Maple League. So important to note your support and collaboration of the 4 campuses. We talk, the Maple League, our tagline, right? Extraordinary way of learning. I think COVID has certainly put the bright light on that in terms of extraordinary ways of communicating and engaging. And while I think we've always worked really, really well together, I'm really impressed with the way that we've come together. Not just the presidents, but the vice presidents, the registrars, the IT teams, the financial teams. It's really been a cross-cutting engagement. And certainly speaking with my colleagues here around the screen here, since the height of the pandemic, every Saturday morning, I've had several cups of coffee with Peter and Michael and Kevin before, and now Andrew, of course, joining us for Saturday mornings Maple League discussions. And we've been doing that now for back to the beginning of the pandemic. And what we've done is that we talked about public health issues that both Michael and Peter have already pointed to. We've talked about how we work with our campus community, how we welcome people back to our campus safely and thoughtfully, how we've really focused on the kind of academic learning that we do in the Maple League, and how we would deliver a model of learning in the fall that would be commensurate with what we've always talked about as being that extraordinary way of learning in the Maple League. Of course, we talked about financial issues, financial cost containment, the issues that Peter raised earlier. And really importantly, we talked at great length about the community, and we're very proudly linked to our communities. So between Sackville, Antigonish, Wolfville, Lennoxville, Sherbrooke, these are communities that are really integrally linked to our campuses. So we spent a great deal of time talking about that. And certainly in our roles as university leaders, it can be a bit lonely sometimes. So I really appreciate the camaraderie of having my colleagues around the table and having those Saturday morning conversations, which shall continue into the future. But ultimately, I think this kind of collaboration has really helped prepare our 4 universities for a safe reopening of our campuses and for a resilient onward and forward post-COVID academic excellence plan for our 4 universities. So thank you for the question, Jessica. I think we're ready and we're keen to welcome our students back to campus.
Thanks, Jean-Paul. And, you know, I think that you've mentioned a number of different sets of conversations at different tables. And I can say that, you know, pre-COVID, we had some regular meetings with our, you know, Maple League TLC and our Maple League Academic Committee, but we really, you know, instead of monthly meetings, some of our faculty and students are meeting every week now and really seeing the value of troubleshooting and brainstorming from the grassroots all the way to the top. So I think that there's some really great dynamic energy there that you've really spoken to. And I hope that we can continue that kind of momentum. So now moving on to our brand new resident, Andrew Haken at St. Francis Xavier. You are 15 days into the Antigonish community and now in isolation yourself at home, but you have incredible perspectives and experience across the sectors, especially coming from Alberta. And I wonder if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about your thinking about the future of post-secondary education in Canada.
Good morning, Jessica. Thank you very much for that question. Pleasure to be here and to join a group that I've actually admired from afar for some time. So great to be here. Hello, new colleagues from SynFX Online. This is day 7 of self-isolation for me, and I'll just pick up on something Jean-Paul just said. This is a lonely experience right now. Sitting in an office, but I'm very pleased to be able to offer you some thoughts on the future of education in Canada. So when I think about that, and I think about what post-secondary does, I think that post-secondary is a driver for personal and social transformation. And then that keys in something else when I think about that. I'm reminded of the words of one of my mentors over the years, and I'm going to attribute this statement to him. His line would always be, education is good, go and get some. And he always used to say, it doesn't matter where you get it from, you need to get some. I think that's a strong, strong statement. Good advice. And I know many have taken that advice over the years. But when I think about the future of education in Canada, I think about those actually who find our system to be inaccessible. And there can be a multitude of reasons for that, whether it's financial or cultural or just being debt averse. These are reasons that stop people from accessing our system. And so when I go into that, I think if our country is to move forward, then we need to provide that access. We need to think about the ways we develop tomorrow's leaders, such that when we look at Canada, we are producing leaders that are representative of the diverse array of people who call Canada their home. In other words, very simply put, I think we have to work hard, and I think we have to work constantly at trying to remove those barriers that stop access to people. We have to make our institutions a place of safety, a place where people feel comfortable, and we have to ensure that we're engaging across the whole of what is a wonderful place of diverse culture that is Canada. We cannot be narrow in our thinking in this respect. And, very quickly, I'll finish by saying, why is this important to me? Because in my education, I was one of the people who had all of the barriers removed by a social system that saw me enter and have my education paid for. It was the best gift I have ever been given. And I don't want to hold that just for me. I want that for others. So I think the future of education in Canada has to and must embrace this piece of accessibility, and we must work constantly at it.
Thanks, Andy. And I think that's such a key piece, and I see that in the chat, right? That we must be welcoming, inclusive, and be really, really aware of, traditionally underrepresented populations and include them in, I love this. Education is good. Go get some. Absolutely. So I just want to signal the halfway mark of the structured panel discussions. And we're going to go back in reverse order. So Andy, I'm going to keep you on the hot spot there just a little bit. And ask you to, and this is a question that I love, that originally Leo Charbonneau, who's the editor of University Affairs, asked at a panel at Congress last June. And it's something that I really continue to visit and revisit, but it's what keeps you up at night? And then the flip side of that same coin is what gets you out of bed in the morning? And sometimes they're the same thing. And so I wonder if you could share with us, I'm sure a lot of things keep you up at night, but equally what gets you motivated to get out of bed and not hide under the covers?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'm finding now that I've made that transition from provost to president, it's a whole new set of dimensions that keep me up at night. But let me try and put some meat on those bones. Part of what we pride ourselves for as institutions is the very robust governance structure that we have. And one of the hallmarks of our governance is that it gives voice to multiple stakeholders. Wonderful. It's wonderful. But with it comes a lot of challenges and a myriad of sort of things to think about. And in many ways, it might not be that difficult from running a small town in that regard. I mean, you hit from all sides, and as someone say, everything from soup to nuts on any given day. So even in this very short period, day 15, I'm finding that there can be a multitude of things that I go to bed at night and go, ooh, let's think about that again. Let's see where we're going. However, for me, there is a constant, and it doesn't matter what position I've been in. And I think it's important to say what that is. It's always focused on our main mission. Are we focused on the student experience and academic excellence? That's where our heads have to be. There's a lot of distractors. There always will be. We've just come into the greatest distractor we've seen in generations. COVID-19. Whatever we do, we can't lose sight of the fact that the experience we deliver will be key to shaping the future generations of leaders for this country. We have to make sure that we are fully engaged with that. So it all boils down to that in many ways. It's also true to say that you have to be focused, in my mind, on the resources you're putting forward to ensure that our faculty and staff are able to do the best job that they can. Are we ensuring the right facilities, the right atmosphere for creative development? Without that, we would have a very locked-in time experience that would not be what we want for our students or for our facilities. Now, just to go and switch into what gets me up in the morning, it's a very simple thing. Personal mission, but I know it's a mission shared by many at SINT-FX. We want to make a difference. And we want to make a difference to tomorrow's leaders. And that is the thing that gets me out of bed. The opportunity to work with people who are on their own journey, making magnificent strides in their education. That is exciting. And that's what gets me up every morning.
Thanks, Andy. And that's a perfect segue to thinking about future leaders, thinking about current student leaders and how thoughtful and reflective and engaged they are. I just wonder, Jean-Paul, we have a number of students on the call, both incoming and returning students. And they're thinking about their institutions and how they've changed in the light of COVID. And I wonder if you could give them some advice or some guidance about what to do. There's talks of gap years, there's talks of coming back or staying online, and I just want to get your insights and guidance for those of the students who are on the call today.
Great, thanks, Jessica, and thanks for the students for joining this call. It's great to have your engagement. We're so happy that you're leaning into this, and you're part of the conversation. We want you to be part of this conversation because it's so important that we get your feedback, your thoughts, and so I hope that we can record your thoughts and questions here today as well, because we'll use them on our respective campuses for sure. I think the first thing I would say to all the students is please come to university. Universities are great places to be. And I think in the context of COVID-19, I can't think of a better place to be than a place of higher learning, a university. And there's great universities in Canada. We're very proud of our 4 Maple League universities. But as you said, Andy, just get an education, go to university. So I would just say go to a university. I would love for you to come to the Maple League, of course, but we've got great universities in this country. So a shout out to all the great universities across this country. Of course, COVID is going to change the way we think about school, how we live, how we work, how we relate to one another. But I think the university is a place where the collision of ideas, the place where innovation happens, the place where thoughts come to action, where we put ideas into action. I think that's a place for our youth for today. When the history books are written about 2020 and 2021, it'll be a very important year. And I think for the youth today, you can be part of this. You can have awesome agency. You can make a difference. Your voice matters now more than ever. So please take your gap year at one of the Maple League universities. That's a great place to have a gap year, I think. And enjoy the opportunity to make a difference. Your voice will matter, and you'll be able to do things. We'll talk about some of the community engaged learning, which is very important on our campus. But a couple of very specific points, Jessica, maybe a little bit more particular to Mount Allison. Obviously, each of us are working on our flexible learning approaches in terms of the academic delivery. So we welcome you to our campuses. I think we've all worked really hard to create, and a shout out to our faculty and our staff who've been working all summer and continue to be working on the ways in which we're going to put together the platform for the fall. It'll be flexible. It's really geared to students and also geared to faculty, because faculty were on the ground floor of shaping how we would deliver the academic content. So shout out to our faculty. Variety of student life activities. A few students said to me, oh, what's it going to be like? I'm going to come to campus. Am I going to just be in my dorm room all by myself and locked away? No. Of course, we'll follow all the health guidelines, social distancing, of course. But I've spoken with our student leaders on our campus. They've got great orientation plan for a variety of activities that will really engage students in a way that will look very similar to previous years, but of course within the COVID health and safety context. We have more support, financial support for students, great enhancement on student services on all of our campuses. We have campus ambassadors at Mount Allison. I know we have them at other universities as well, including the Maple League, of course. We've got a Facebook site for the class of 2020. So, if you're concerned about what it's going to be like, talk to your classmates. Talk to students in your own incoming program for Mount Allison's Facebook Class of 2020, for example. We have a preview day at our campus, July 20th, 22nd. If you're living in residence, you can speak to an ambassador and have an online video connection to your actual room in residence. And you can even take measurements and do all the kinds of things you like to do to see what your dorm room will look like when you come to campus. So a lot of things will look different, of course, but a lot of things will be the same. We really want to highlight that beautiful, important, immersive experience that happens in the Maple League of Universities. So those are some quick thoughts, Jessica, but really my key message is around agency, come to campus, make a difference. We need you, we want you. Great year to take a gap year at the Maple League.
Yay. And can I put in a pitch too, that for any of the students on the call right now who want to get engaged in some student leadership opportunities, we have a number of student working groups and a number of committees that we love having, students working with, making decisions, and doing that co-design. So we have both paid internships and volunteer opportunities. So please send me an email if you want to dream and scheme, because this is the time, as Jean-Paul says, for us to remake our institutions to be really student-focused and student-centered and accessible and inclusive. Now's the time, and I think making sure we showcase students at the table is really important. Yeah, thanks, Jean-Paul. Michael, we've been talking about COVID. All of these questions are COVID, COVID, COVID. We've been bombarded in the news and in our thinking. And I wonder if maybe you could talk to us about an issue not related to COVID or separate from COVID, or something else that you think is an opportunity for institutions of higher learning to address at this moment in time.
Thanks, Jessica. I mean, I'm sure for virtually everyone, both individually and collectively as institutions, there have been two really significant topics over these last several months. One is COVID, as you say, and the other is the discussion about systemic racism, about equality and diversity and inclusion that have been provoked by the killing by the police in Minneapolis of George Floyd. And it's engendered a really important discussion in the United States, here in Canada, around the world, and on our campuses. So I think that the urgency of addressing systemic racism in our own institutions and determining how we can best provide leadership to combat racism and discrimination in our society are issues that we were concerned about before, clearly, but I think have become that much more urgent as a consequence of the events and the mobilization over these last several months. There's a bit of a connection to COVID, and I think Andy touched a bit on this, in that one of the things that got exposed by COVID, and it exposed many things. First was that there is a much greater risk for certain vulnerable populations, certain minority populations. They're more vulnerable to the virus, so it's helped, shine a light on the inequalities in our society. But even within our universities, as universities went online, it became clear that, of course, some people had greater access to technology than others. And people who were less advantaged, who had less access to technology, were less advantaged in terms of continuing their education. So I think those are all things that we become more aware of in these last couple of months. And so I think we have an obligation as Maple League universities to really address these issues. And the positive is, and here I tie into what Jean-Paul was saying, it's also an opportunity. There's an important discussion that's going on in Canada, and we have an opportunity to lead it. To lead in terms of what we do on our own institutions, but most particularly, how do we educate ourselves? How do we educate our students so that they can be effective advocates and change leaders so that we become the more inclusive society, institution, country that we wish to be? So interesting for me, I think these two issues are in some ways related. And we have been called through this to act. And the opportunity is, so I echo Jean-Paul, come to our campuses, because there's going to be fierce, direct, hard debates about what we need to do. And it's important that all voices are present in those discussions.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for the reminder of both opportunity and obligation, right? We have real responsibilities as institutions of higher learning to make spaces for candid and contested conversations to make the world better. And I think that is really highlighted in all four of our institutions and an essential part of a 21st century liberal education. Yeah, so thank you for that. The final question in the structured part of this panel is for Peter Ricketts. And it's inspired by a comment by Yuval Noah Harari, who is a social historian who wrote an article in the Financial Times a couple of weeks after the shutdown in mid-March. And he observed that, quote, "This storm will pass, but the choices we make now could change our lives for years to come." So Peter, could you talk to us a little bit about what decisions you see being made and are in the process of being made that will hopefully shape the world for the better?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jessica. I think this is a really important question because, when you're dealing with emergency situations, you tend to focus on the here and now and making decisions that almost sort of have, daily basis, and the ground is shifting so much that, it's very difficult to think ahead. But I do think we need to be very cognizant about how we make sure that we come out of this situation not only intact, but also, in fact, stronger and learning from it. Because, any education involves learning from situations, and that means learning from mistakes and learning from bad situations as well as learning from good. So here's a number of decisions that I think have impact for this. So first of all, I think the decisions that we're making around what we're expecting as the norms for social behavior and respect for others are ones that, if they are continued in the future, will improve our lives. I must admit that when I've gone out to the shops and been out and about a bit, once we were allowed out and about, I've actually liked the fact that people aren't bumping into me. People are respectfully saying after you, giving you space to go through doors and all that. It's kind of nice. And I do think that there are aspects of this, of how we engage with each other and respect each other, that could really come out of this situation if we could maintain them, and as long as we don't allow things to slip back to where they were before. And of course, one of the big things we're talking about as we bring our faculty and staff and students back onto campus and into our communities is that is how people are going to behave. And I think that this is a really important learning moment for us. We're also making decisions on health and safety that I think will be around cleanliness and concern for spreading disease and infection, that again will raise overall health and wellness in society if we continue to maintain them at reasonable levels post-pandemic. And again, I think we can learn about not letting us to slip back into complacency about this, because quite frankly, we often have taken health and cleanliness of our institutions for granted. And let's face it, we've all cut back on things like that, on the regular cleaning and the intensity of cleaning. And I think that's something that we need to look at, because one thing we can be sure of is that this pandemic won't be the last. The second thing we're making decisions about is on technology. And we've learned a great deal about technology during this, its strengths and its weaknesses. And we've been forced actually to make decisions to use technology not in ways that we thought were unimaginable, but actually in ways that we just actually wanted to avoid. And by thrusting us into a greater reliance on technology to assist in how we carry out our business and our day-to-day lives, I think it's made us more willing and more creative around how we can use technology. And I think the decisions we're making today will have an impact, positive impact, on our teaching, our administrative operations, and the way in which we work and interact with each other through the use of the appropriate and responsible use of technology. And on the flip side of this are the decisions we've made around valuing the importance of human interaction and engagement. Something that we value extraordinarily highly in the Maple League is now being shown to be of huge significance in life, period. And when you lose something that you've come to take for granted, you tend to learn its true value. And I certainly hope that the decisions we're making around continuing to have students and faculty and staff engage with each other in a human context I hope those things will be given greater value going forward, and that the human experience will be seen as an essential part of education in a global world. And the final point I'll make, which relates to the global, is that I do believe that this pandemic has raised our consciousness around the reality, and not just the possibility, the reality of global change. And whether it be on climate change or on racial equality, human rights, or global health, no one can say that what happens on the other side of the world does not affect them. And no one can say that what happens here in my locality doesn't impact the rest of the world. And if we can improve the way we make decisions for global humanity, then this pandemic will have brought something good.
Thank you, Peter. And that sort of concludes the structured panel of the questions that I had, but we did a social media call for questions from our community, and we got some fantastic questions, predominantly from students. And there are some really, we're not going to have time for all of the questions, but I'd like to keep them and to continue to digest them and even form working groups around them. I've tried to compress them into various themes, and maybe we're going to do like some pretty short, quick, snappy answers because I'd like their voices to be heard or at least put into the panel today. So the first question I have is a theme around community and service learning, but also high impact practices, submitted by Janine Annette, a student at Acadia, and Tiffany McClellan, a student at St. X. And the question is about how Maple League universities are ensuring that faculty and students are supported for developing community campus partnerships in the upcoming year. And also in this hybrid model of course delivery, how do we leverage high impact practices? So one of them is community engagement. Another is undergraduate research, capstone courses, small first year seminars. How do we leverage these high impact practices and community engagement in the time of COVID? So Jean-Paul, maybe as a person who's been thinking really carefully and for a long time about social innovation, could you field that question from Tiffany and Janine?
Sure, thanks, Jessica. Great questions, Tiffany and Janine. Those really go to the heart of what we do at our Maple League universities, frankly, because it's about that connection between the classroom, the hallways, the lab, the library, the community. It's the spaces in between, as we talk about at Mount Allison, that really make a difference. So really, really appreciate hearing that type of question. And all of our campuses, experiential learning is a key part, the DNA of our institutions, part of that immersive experience. And we don't want COVID to stop that ability. In fact, if we go back to the beginning of the pandemic, most of our campuses across the country were engaged in our communities, showing how universities are valued in their communities. In our campus context, for example, we had a Tantramar community task force around COVID-19, food security, mental health support for the community, delivery of food, for example, mental health, education. And our students, our faculty and staff were involved in the Tantramar, also multi-group, multi-towns of Sackville, Port Elgin, Dorchester, First Nations community. So already in the height of the pandemic, our students, faculty, and staff were engaged in the community. And I think fast forward experiential learning, career development on all of our campuses, we have offices devoted to this kind of work. And community engaged learning and social innovation, do good better, is so important now more than ever, as I keep saying, in this context of COVID. And I think that community engaged learning will actually shine a bright light on how to make a difference. So again, back to my comment on agency, we need those student engagement. We need the students to step up with their thoughts or ideas or concerns. And the community engaged learning and social service learning delivery is the perfect way in which to enliven and to bring to fruition those passions that students come to our universities with.
Thank you so much, Jean-Paul. And, a really interesting lens through which maybe we can double down on these high impact practices in the time of COVID and really do that intentionally so it's built into our courses, but also our programs and our strategic visions. So the next question comes from Tanisha Campbell, who's a student at Bishop's University. And she's asking about how the Maple League Universities as a consortium, as a group, can help to bridge the gap for first generation students coming in, especially for incoming students, right, for in their first year, where they're arriving at university and things have changed rapidly. She's particularly interested in ensuring enriching and engaging learning through remote learning. So how do we help both incoming and returning students? And maybe Andy, since you talked yourself about being a first generation student, and benefiting from an accessible education, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
No, happy to. Thanks for the question, Tanisha. I think that's a great question. And it's one that many of us have worried about across the country. How do you help with that transition? I think, you know, and another piece that COVID has really shown us is that as humans, we crave interaction. And we ask ourselves very simple questions about the type of interactions that we have. Are we comfortable here? Will I be supported? Is this me? They're very simple pieces, and we gravitate towards those areas where those questions are always in the affirmative. That's where I want to be. These are my people. So the question is, how do we create that sort of environment for people who have no experience from where they're coming with post-secondary? And I think it's about reaching out early. I think it's about looking at different ways to connect. I think there are a number of experiments being done across the country, and I think Maple League is getting there as well, but I apologize, I'm new to the sort of details of Maple League. But some of the things we're trying to do are, for example, reaching out to the high school students and giving university-type experiences at the high school level. This is what it's like. This is what a lecture looks like. This is what an online delivery looks like from a university. But not setting it up such that we're in isolation from the high school, rather partnering with high schools to ensure that those experiences are going to get some form of credit along the way. So I think that's a very powerful way of doing it. But there are other pieces that we really need to do, and I think some of us already are doing this. And that is that University 101. Make that experience, that transitional part of coming to a university, very accessible. And it doesn't mean that you always have to come to campus. You can set that up with online variations of that, recognizing the hardship financially of bringing someone to campus from afar. You can do different models. And so I think that's really for people who have no experience with post-secondary. It's important to say that you do belong. And what's more, there's some really important pieces for you to think about. I mean, I'm a great lover of Michael Marmot's work, the Whitehall Study, social determinants of health. If you take also a look at the education of someone and look at their lifetime earnings, guess what? The integrated lifetime earnings of someone with a higher education are larger. Do we know that coming in? Do we know that the better your education, the more likely you are to receive better medical attention? That is the principles of the Whitehall Study. And Michael's work really sets it down, but more people need to know this. Education is good for you. Go get some. We can break down those barriers.
Thank you, Angie. I think that's really important. And I think that, Tanisha and a number of really fantastic student leaders and advocates are thinking carefully and critically about how to do that from the student side. And we're certainly doing that, on the faculty side. We actually have a session on inclusive practices for first generation students hosted by our Better Together Maple League series coming up next week. So that's definitely a hot topic for us. Yeah, so that's good. I want to make sure, we're going to have time maybe for 2 more questions. I want to make sure that we talk about fossil fuel divestment. It's a question that has come up in a number of submitted questions in advance. And I'm going to just read a couple of the excerpts and then pass it on to you. But one of the questions from Dr. Tim Reifenstein, a faculty member from Mount Allison, is, has the Maple League given any thought to collectively divesting from fossil fuel investments? Such a move would signal it's time for the members' 19th century endowments to match 21st century values. And we have that echoed from Helen Yao, a student at Mount Allison, and also Islay Fraser, who is talking about, as students, they are aware that what has been accomplished thus far in switching to sustainable energy sources, like limiting parking spaces, changing light bulbs, etc. Structural change, however, needs to happen with a demonstrated commitment to sustainability. And she also includes how we can protect some of our marginalized and vulnerable populations in these kinds of social justice actions and efforts. And this is a conversation that Michael actually brought to the President's Council a few months ago about, let's have a candid conversation about this issue. It's an important one, it's an urgent one. And so, Michael, can you just speak to that a little bit as a burning issue for us as institutions of higher learning?
A burning issue about fossil fuels.
That was unintended. I'm so sorry.
So yes, as you said, Jessica, and again, I want to echo what Jean-Paul said. One of the great advantages of the Maple League is it has given people at different roles in our institutions the opportunity to have others that they can talk to. And so yes, I did raise this with the other three presidents, and we all agreed that this was something we wanted to talk about together and focus on. But I have to say, in answer to Tim's question, no, we're not as far advanced as saying we think that we should take a common position on divestment. I'm not saying we won't get there. I'm just saying we haven't had the opportunity to have the concrete discussion. I would like to say that, again, one of the things that I think distinguishes the Maple League is that we are universities where it is possible to have respectful, intelligent discussions about hard issues. And it's easier to do that and for everyone to participate when you have 2,500 students or 4,000 students. Much, much more difficult to do that on a campus with 50 or 60 or 70,000 students. So this is a complex issue. I know people feel very strongly about it, and some people see it in very, clear terms. Others would say there's some competing issues here. One is I can speak for Bishop's own foundation. There are some people on our foundation who feel that their role is to take those financial resources, maximize them in whatever way possible, and hand them over to the university so the university can use them for scholarships, for improving the quality of teaching, a variety of things. Others would say, and I have to say I'm more of this view, that we have a responsibility to determine how we can use our capital resources to advance the efforts to have a more sustainable planet. So I think it is a critical issue. I look very much forward to having the opportunity to hear from the other institutions as we have this discussion, which I think has to happen now. So we've been a little bit preoccupied with COVID. I think everyone would understand that. But it's certainly on our agenda for the fall to be discussing that, one at Bishop's and I would think within the Maple League.
And just very quickly, thank you, Jessica and Mike. I'll just interject very quickly just because it's been a conversation. And certainly, and Tim's right, there's been a conversation on our campus. Our students have been very, very engaged and thoughtfully engaged. And I've had the pleasure of meeting with a number of the students from Divest coalitions on our campus and, listen to them. We've had really thoughtful, engaged discussions. And I think all of our campuses, obviously we're all making a difference with regards to the environmental impact. And, we've been tracking our carbon footprint at Mount Allison for over a decade. We've done all the various steps, from energy efficiencies to LED to motion detection to reduce the amount of impact on fossil fuels, because they are indeed the biggest impact on the globe. Of course, as you say, Michael, COVID got in the way a bit on the front page of the newspapers. I mean, climate change is still very, very much there and very real. And it's a great space for our students to be engaged. Certainly in terms of investment on that very specific question, that requires a fulsome discussion, no question. Certainly our university, we're very proud to be amongst the first universities to sign on to the, sort of the signature of the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investing using ESG principles around environment, social governance. So we're doing more. We're doing a lot. We can do more. And I think we can do more better. So it's a conversation for the future for sure. And again, I welcome the feedback of our campus communities on this issue.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Jean-Paul. And it certainly is an ongoing one. And we have Georges Philippe, who is a student at Bishop's on this call, and he's actually been working with me on a Maple League sustainability framework so that every event that we have in person, we follow sustainability guidelines, that we donate money to offset the carbon footprint of any of our guest speakers, any people who come to campus, or that we move to Summit. So we're definitely thinking about that through those lenses, and I think those student voices are so fantastic for inspiring and moving forward these discussions and ideas. So yeah, thank you. I'm cognizant of time. It is 12:02. I know that people have other meetings and other events to attend and to host. Is there any last comment or concern? I've been peeking into the chat box, and I've seen a couple of great questions about international students and the accommodations for international students, which we're working on our individual campuses. A real shout out for research and a reassurance that the Maple League is a hub of research as well. We have a very active Maple League research committee that is committed to creating interinstitutional research hubs to get us ready for tri-council funding, external funding, lots of different kinds of things being explored there. But are there any sort of closing reflections or remarks, Peter? We haven't heard from you in this sort of less structured Q&A that you might want to share with us as sort of final thoughts as we leave this panel for today, but continue the conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica, and thanks everybody for participating today, and thank you all for the great questions. I know there were a number of questions around international students, and I want to thank you for those. And I think this is a particular challenge for international students, obviously, because of the additional barriers there are for you. But a number of the questions had focused on, the ability to start studies online, and the fact, all of our universities are making arrangements so that international students can start your studies online. And the government of Canada is also relaxing the regulations so that these you can start studying online either while you are still applying for your study permit, or even before you have applied for your study permit. And then once you get that study permit, as long as you qualify, then of course you could come and travel to Canada, because you would be exempt from the travel restrictions that exist for the general population. I think the other piece is that any online studies that you do in the fall, before you do eventually come to Canada, you can have those courses contribute to eligibility for postgraduate work permit as well. So I would say the comments in the chat have been helpful in that you address, contact the international office or just the recruitment office in any of our universities, and we'll give you that information, and a lot of that information is on our websites as well. So I do urge you not to allow the COVID virus crisis to prevent you from your dream of coming to Canada and studying for your education, or returning to Canada to continue your studies. I hope you will continue to do that. The final point I'll just make is that I think out of any crisis comes bad things and good things. We've learned a lot about ourselves during this crisis. And as I say, I think there will be important lessons that we learn going forward. And I think the greatest lesson we can learn is how we can live in community better than before. I think the whole point of a Maple League education is that the whole experience is a high impact practice. It is an immersive experience. And I believe that this crisis challenges us to make that immersive experience even more effective and more productive, because we need to think a little more about structuring, what we do between classes, what we do in how we engage in our social activities and things like that. And I think we will be able to create better institutions as a result of it. So I appreciate you all being part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And that real importance on community and community building and citizenship, I think, is absolutely essential for us. And it's been one of our values for 176 plus years on each one of our campuses. And sort of the wrapping up those final thoughts, thank you to the presidents who have really given us excellent insights into the hopeful nature, the critical hope of institutions of higher learning that allow us to have these candid and contested conversations, to navigate complexity, to welcome into the conversation some of the discomfort and disorientation that COVID has presented, but that we're doubling down on this collaboration and we're doubling down on community building. So if I was to sort of capture each one of you, Peter on community building, Jean-Paul saying, get to campus, come be part of the conversation, take a gap year here. Andy saying, go get some education, it's good for you. And Michael saying, please, let's also think about how we can do better and be better through this lens now and into the future. So I just really appreciate the generosity of spirit that you've shown, the time and dedication from these presidents. I know that they are up late at night thinking about this and getting up early in the morning and trying to facilitate these conversations. And I appreciate your time. And for all of those of you on the call who want to engage, who want to connect with collaborators across the other 3 campuses, please send me an email. And we're really happy to create this hub for continuing the conversation. So be well, and let's keep these conversations going. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye.